It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, and faith-focused feature stories with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
Good afternoon and welcome to the broadcast. I'm Family Life News anchor Sarah Harnish. It is the ceasefire heard round the world. Iran and America on a 2-week pause after a deal was signed last night, brokered in part by Pakistan. There are demonstrations in New York City today.
I think that anytime people aren't dying, that's good.
Iran's power grid and bridges saved. The IRGC is pitching it as their win. CBS's Elizabeth Palmer gives us an inside look in Tehran.
The celebration started immediately. Regime supporters gloating over what they see as a clear victory. State television put it this way: the enemy has suffered an undeniable, historic, and crushing defeat.
But former Deputy National Security Advisor Victoria Coates warns President Trump holds the cards.
Make no mistake about it, the president retains every option at his disposal to go back in and do more damage to Iran. But hopefully they're going to be in a more reasonable frame of mind.
This is how it went down. American bombs and fighter jets were ready at 8 p.m. last night, but Fox's Alexandria Hoff says they never left the ground.
This came down to the wire. This agreement to the ceasefire was made less than 2 hours before President Trump's 8 p.m. deadline. That was the deadline to make a deal. If not, the president had threatened earlier in the day that civilization would be ending in that area.
Now to the conditions of the ceasefire. Former CIA station chief Dan Hoffman lays out what's next.
I think the next 2 weeks are going to be really challenging diplomatic negotiations in Islamabad. If Iran's 10-point peace plan is far from, I think, what the United States would accept.
Hoffman says Iran won't get anything they're asking for.
To control the Strait of Hormuz, Iran wants U.S. to withdraw all our combat forces. They want to proceed with nuclear enrichment. That's not even including the fact that Iran has roughly 1,000 pounds of enriched uranium that we'd like to get our hands on, and nothing about IAEA inspections in Iran or their ballistic missile program or support to proxy terrorists. So there's a lot to get through in 2 weeks.
Vice President J.D. Vance stepped off the stage at MCC College in Hungary this morning. He also weighed in on Iran.
They're going to find out that the President of the United States is not one to mess around. He's impatient, and I think if they negotiate in good faith, we will be able to find a deal. But that's a big if, and ultimately it's up to the Iranians. I hope they make the right decision.
Vance meeting with the prime minister there. The big question back at home is, when are gas prices going to start to drop? They're up over $1 a gallon since the war with Iran began. The BBC's Nick Marsh says restoring oil production is going to take a while.
You can't just, switch on oil production overnight.
Dow futures have surged more than 1,000 points just this morning on word of the ceasefire, and oil has plunged below $100 a barrel. The crew of Artemis II is set to land back on the Earth on Friday.
They're on their way, just like when you're on vacation, you're on your way back home. So they're on their way back home right now.
Sean Mahoney is Space Frontier Foundation's executive director. He says this trip logged a lot of firsts.
They have now gone farther than anybody else, any human has ever gone, which is incredible and is awesome. This is great. We've got the capacity. Now, how do we make sure that we can keep up the cadence to not just go see the moon once or twice a century, but actually do it regularly?
At re-entry, the astronauts will be traveling 25,000 miles an hour. That is 32 times the speed of sound. The outside temperature will be 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, half as hot as the sun.
The extremes of space are incredible and awe-inspiring. Those extremes of coming back are even more so. The ability to slow down is as important as the ability to speed up when you're taking off.
The crew is scheduled to splash down in the Pacific Ocean Friday at 8:07 p.m., ending a 10-day mission. Voters in Georgia will replace Marjorie Taylor Greene with a prosecutor endorsed by the president. Republican Clay Fuller has beaten Democrat Sean Harris by double digits, 57 to 43% in a special election runoff for Greene's congressional seat. Fuller credits grassroots support.
President Trump endorsed this and February, and that was kind of the rocket fuel that got us going.
Democrat Sean Harris says he came up short but didn't lose.
Because nobody ever thought that a Democrat would actually have a performance like this.
Fuller will serve out the rest of Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene's term but could face a rematch against Harris in November. Iraqi officials say American journalist Shelley Kittleson has been released. She was abducted last week. CBS's Olivia Gazis.
Kittleson had been identified in advance, with her name appearing on a list of American journalists that the group had been tracking for potential abduction. Kittleson is a veteran freelance reporter who has covered Iraq and the broader region extensively. Kataib Hezbollah is among the most capable Iran-aligned militias in Iraq and has previously targeted U.S. personnel and facilities.
Happening today, accused Gilgo Beach serial killer Rex Heuermann is heading to court and is expected to plead guilty to a string of gruesome murders. This is after years of fighting the system. Some are asking why now. Attorney Mayhek Cook.
The walls were just narrowing in on this case. If you look at this, it was entirely built on modern DNA evidence, and as prosecutors have said, a blueprint of cell phone, burner phones, computer files that were continuing to show that the defendant was likely guilty.
The former architect is accused of killing 7 women on Long Island. 2 young men who allegedly ignited homemade bombs near New York's Gracie Mansion have been formally charged. The 8-count indictment released last night charges 19-year-old Ibrahim Kiyumi and 18-year-old Amir Balat with conspiring to use a weapon of mass destruction and providing material support to ISIS. Prosecutors say the pair had hoped their bomb would kill 60 people during a demonstration outside the mayor's residence last month. Their bombs did not go off, and no one was injured. A day after an apparent missile failure, North Korea has tested multiple ballistic missiles. Reporter Alex Jensen is in Seoul.
This is now the 4th time this year that North Korea is known to have conducted a ballistic missile test, violating UN Security Council resolutions and defying global order amid conflict elsewhere in the world.
The Michigan men's basketball team has returned to campus as NCAA champions after beating UConn. Dozens of fans greeted the team upon their return to Ann Arbor. A victory parade will take place on Saturday. Amazon and the U.S. Postal Service have reached a new package handling deal that is better than expected for USPS. CBS's Michael Wallace.
Amazon has agreed to cut the number of packages it ships through the Postal Service by only 20% this fall. The e-commerce giant had threatened to cut that number by 2/3. The 20% reduction will still put a big dent in the Postal Service's revenue. Amazon is its largest customer, but Amazon has been expanding its own delivery service, especially in rural areas.
And Tipping Point, a tech company that serves more than 10,000 restaurants, says tipping fatigue has hit almost every corner of the service industry.
Many consumers still feel obligated to tip, and a lot of times it's influenced by they're standing in a checkout line, a tipping screen comes on, especially if they're standing in front of a worker. They feel maybe a bit more obligated to leave a tip.
Pop Menus, Jennifer Grass.
The height of the pandemic, we saw really generous tipping. As we saw tipping become more prevalent, we start to see people growing a bit more immune to tipping.
9 in 10 Americans now view tipping as out of control. 22% report they tip less in 2025 than they did in 2024. Still to come on the Noon Report, a water main break hits 3 towns. An Albert the Alligator update, and construction season has begun. But weather first with Kevin Williams.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams. On this bright, sunny day, we're talking a warming trend. I've got the numbers in your forecast. That's up in 10 minutes.
Thank you, Kevin. Checking the stories making news where you live in New York and Pennsylvania. Gas prices jumped another 5 cents a gallon this week. It happened right as lawmakers were hosting a press conference calling for a freeze on the state gas tax because of the war in Iran. Janelle Stelzen is a congressional candidate.
When you're paying $4 or more to fill up your tank, you feel it.
The gas tax in Pennsylvania is 57 cents a gallon. State Senator Lisa Boscola told ABC 27 she wants it suspended for 60 days.
Everything's about affordability, right? That's all we hear. If it's really affordability and you know these prices are impacting people's pocketbook, Why aren't we doing something about it?
But would suspending the gas tax work to lower prices? Maybe a little, experts say, but it's assessed on the wholesale price, so Pennsylvanians wouldn't be able to subtract 57 cents from the price on the sign. How much tax to pass on is up to the 4,000 gas stations across the state. And then there's PennDOT, which relies on the tax to maintain roads. Nothing's been submitted yet to lower the gas tax in the Keystone State. A water main break in Elma is impacting 11,000 people across western New York. Officials say the break happened Tuesday morning, cutting off service to 3/4 of the town and impacting people in nearby Orchard Park and Aurora. Nate Sobczak says the disruption is more than an inconvenience.
At home, I realized there's no water pressure in the kitchen sink, and then I'm like, oh, there's probably something wrong. Then I went and saw the bathroom sink was the same thing. I'm like, all right, we have no water pressure.
He's caring for his elderly mother.
The toilets, having to using the toilets, having to take a shower, all that stuff. That's all delayed now until the water pressure's on. So that's the biggest issue right now.
This resident told WGRZ not everyone has options.
A lot of them could probably drink well water, but not everybody has a well anymore. So you're kind of left with going to the grocery store, or hopefully water distribution like this will help.
For those with livestock, the challenge is even greater. Susan Collier has horses. She has to drive 15 minutes away to Lancaster to get water for them.
They usually drink anywhere from 30 to 40 gallons of water a day, and I have 2 horses. A lot of people have a lot more, and a lot more animals, so it's hard. You can't go to your neighbors because they don't have water either.
4 water distribution sites have been set up. Water main breaks with the warm-cold temperature fluctuations are common in upstate New York. They were near record low temperatures this morning, and it was 24 degrees in Elma yesterday. By Friday, it'll be 70. New York lawmakers have passed an extender that buys a bit more time to finish the state budget. Family Life's Mark Webster has that story.
Yeah, this is now the second state budget extension, and the latest edition buys lawmakers until April 14th. We're more than a week past the budget deadline. The extension was promptly signed into law Tuesday by Governor Hochul. It ensures the state can cover essential expenses and make payroll deadlines. It's the governor's 5th time delivering a late state budget, and she's made it clear she has no problem digging in to put pressure on state lawmakers to cede ground. Sticking points include reform to the state's car insurance laws, dialing back the 2019 climate law, raising taxes on the wealthy, school aid, and Tier 6 pension reform. Lawmakers return to Albany on Monday. Mark Webster, Family Life News.
Josh Shapiro is outraising Treasurer Stacey Garrity 10-1 in the latest fundraising round in the race for Pennsylvania's next governor. Shapiro raised $10,500,000 in the first quarter of 2026, adding to his $30 million war chest saved from last year. Garrity raised $1 million in the first quarter, adding to the $1 million she saved from last year. Shapiro picking up 6- and 7-figure donations. Pennsylvania residents have until May 4th to register to vote in the primary. A change may be coming to charter schools in the Keystone State. A new bill would impact kids who want to attend cyber charter schools outside the district. Family Life's Brian Query has more.
Under the proposal, districts could avoid those payments if they meet certain requirements, like verifying student residency and offering in-person support. Republicans agree there are concerns, but warn the bill could restrict options for students, particularly in rural areas with fewer course offerings. The measure is now in committee as lawmakers weigh how to balance affordability with access to education. Brian Query, Family Life News.
The final chapter may be at hand in the saga of Albert the alligator, the pet reptile seized by New York State. A Hamburg man tells WGRZ he's decided to end his 2-year legal battle in which he sought the return of his pet. Attorney Peter Kushin represents Tony Cavallaro. He said he's made the decision that the pursuit of his pet is no longer worth it.
It's going to be another appeal, another year and a half of litigation. By that time, it's going to be 3.5, 4 years. And even if we win, I get this thing back and the license gets reinstated. And then I got to deal with the state, who is going to be all over me for the rest of my life.
Cavallaro kept the 750-pound reptile inside a room with an indoor pool in his Hamburg home for about 30 years until the state seized the animal in March of 2024, touching off a legal battle which made national headlines. Cavallaro is no longer a New York resident, says his attorney.
He doesn't like how he was treated by the state, and I don't blame him. And I don't think he wants to, live here and give them his tax revenue anymore. So That's his choice, but he feels he was mistreated by the government.
Albert the alligator was eventually taken to a sanctuary in Beaumont, Texas. And it is April, and that can only mean one thing. Construction season is officially underway in Pennsylvania. PennDOT held a press conference in Dunmore on Tuesday.
67 new projects, estimated at over $655 million.
It is said there are two seasons in the Keystone State, winter and construction. Jonathan Abolai with PennDOT District 4 laid out what you'll see as you navigate the orange cones this summer.
80 miles of roadway improvements, 200 bridges being addressed, 430 miles of seal coat, 1,300 lane miles of crack sealing, and 1,300 lane miles of shoulder cutting.
One of the larger projects will be the reconstruction of Route 219 along Interstate 81, a popular rest area in Susquehanna County. Let the festivities begin. Sports are on deck next with our own Randy Snavely.
Good afternoon, I'm Randy Snavely. Sarah, the Yankees got 2 home runs from Ahmad Rosario, including the go-ahead 3-run shot in the 8th inning, and that propelled the Bronx Bombers to a 5-3 victory over the Athletics. The Mets won their 4th in a row, walking it off in the 10th inning. That came on an RBI single from Ronnie Mauricio. 4-3 your final. The Pirates' young guns were on display as they beat up the Padres 7-1. Paul Skeens took a no-no into the 6th inning, ended giving up 2 hits over 6 1/3, and he struck out 6. 19-year-old Connor Griffin had a pair of hits and drove in 2, and O'Neal Cruz had a double to drive in another 2. The Phillies were shut out 6-0 in San Francisco. Robbie Ray on his game over 6 2/3 of no-run ball. He struck out 7. Other winners in baseball: the Guardians, Orioles, Twins, Rangers, Reds, Cardinals, Cubs, Red Sox, Dodgers, Rockies, and Braves. On the ice, the Flyers continue to keep their playoff hopes alive after knocking off New Jersey. Trevor Zegras and Tyson Forster both scored twice in their 5-1 victory. Also skating to wins: the Canadiens, Senators, Blue Jackets, Canes, Avs, Stars, Wild, Mammoth, Golden Knights, and Predators. And in the NBA, Jeremiah Fears set a franchise rookie record for the Pelicans. He scored 40 points as New York beat the Jazz 156-137. Also picking up wins: the Bulls, T-Wolves, Nets, Raptors, Celtics, Warriors, Thunder, Clippers, and Rockies. And that's a look at sports.
All right, Randy, still to come on the Noon Report. What is next with Iran? J.D. Vance goes to college, and the most important thing with your sleep schedule. Those stories next.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. On April the 7th, 2007, Holy Saturday that year, cartoonist Johnny Hart died of a stroke while working at his drawing table. Hart was the award-winning creator of 2 popular comic strips, The Wizard of Iz and BC, which at one time reached 100 million readers worldwide every single day. In a 1999 Breakpoint commentary, Chuck Colson identified Hart as the most widely read Christian of our time, with more readers than C.S. Lewis, Frank Peretti, and Billy Graham combined. He wasn't wrong. Raised in a moderately religious home, Hart's faith became more serious around 1984 when a born-again father-son team had installed a satellite dish in his home. Not long after that, his Christianity became more and more evident in his comic strips. According to Hart, and I quote, "It started out like when Christmas would roll around. If a holiday comes up, I do something about the holiday. I've been doing that for the life of the strip," he said. Well, in my view, Hart was always at his very best around Easter time. His most controversial strip was published on Easter of 2001. It featured a Jewish menorah. As the panels of the strip progressed, the 7 candles burn out, each one captioned with one of the 7 last words of Jesus from the cross. After the final candle is extinguished, captioned with Jesus' words, "It is finished," the arms of the menorah break off and leave there just a cross. The final panel portrays a trail of blood from the cross to the empty tomb, with the stone rolled away, revealing the Lord's table arranged inside. Now, at the time, Hart was accused of being anti-Semitic and of suggesting a form of replacement theology, the idea that Christianity supplants Judaism. Hart clarified later that he was only attempting to demonstrate the Jewish roots of Christianity out of respect for both religions. And of course, according to the Gospels, Jesus claimed to have completed the requirements of Old Testament law. And according to the author of Hebrews, several Jewish traditions, symbols, and essentials are fulfilled in Christ Jesus. Another of Hart's Easter comic strips featured a cross with the note "To be continued" attached. And another one, a caveman asked a couple of friends, "Would you lay down your life for someone else?" "Well, that would be pretty stupid," replies one. "Yeah, why would we do that?" says the other. "You mean like would we die in their place? Nobody has that much love," says the first. And then the second one adds, "And if anyone did, I'd sure hate to lose him." Holding a cross, then a fourth caveman enters the final scene and says, "Well, guys, I've got good news and good news." In one of his lighter Easter comics, a caveman tells a salesman, "I am in the market for a burial site. What have you got in a tomb?" The salesman replies, "I believe we're sold out, but let me check." "Oh, you're not going to believe this. We just had an opening." Now, outside of his comic strip, Johnny Hart explored and embraced certain theological views that I certainly could not agree with. However, he stayed within the bounds of orthodoxy in print, and he covered an incredible amount of theological ground in the process. From the creation of the world to the deity of Christ, the centrality of the cross in history, the forgiveness of sin, substitutionary atonement, all of that in a comic strip. As Chuck Holson wrote way back in 1999, quote, "Johnny Hart can be an inspiration to all of us to find ways to bring a Christian worldview to bear on our work, whatever it may be. Healthy humor is one of God's good gifts to us, and even writing comic strips can be done to his glory," end quote. Indeed, every single aspect of our redeemed lives are to bring glory to God. And that's because of the work of Christ, which for quite a while in American history was described so well over and over and over again in the Sunday funny papers. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint.
A very good afternoon to all. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast for this afternoon. Blue sky, bright sun, and very pleasant, seasonable, and much warmer, or at least milder than it was yesterday. High temperatures in some cases surpassing 50. Tonight, clear. We drop back toward 30, not as cold as last night. Tomorrow, sunshine, warmer, high temps 60s, and then turning out cloudy Friday with showers moving through the area. Temperatures start today in the 50s and 60s on Friday, but then drop through the course of the day.
All right, Kevin, this is the Noon Report on Family Life. I'm Sarah Harnish, and thanks again for joining us. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth and Joint Chiefs of Staff Chair General Dan Kane briefed reporters first thing this morning on the ceasefire deal made last night with Iran. Hegseth declaring an overwhelming victory. He said if Iran had not agreed, it would have been a very different outcome.
Had Iran refused our terms, the next targets would have been their power plants, their bridges, and oil and energy infrastructure, targets they could not defend.
The top goal in that deal, reopening the Strait of Hormuz. CBS's Nancy Cordes is at the White House with what happens next.
Now that a ceasefire is in place, we move to the hard part, hammering out a long-term peace agreement that addresses Iran's nuclear plans, its funding of terrorism, and so on. And Iran has its own demands, including a new $2 million fee for ships to pass through the strait.
The stock market is responding to the ceasefire. Dow futures are up over 1,100 points at this hour. The global market's responding too. Oil dipped below $100 a barrel. Vice President J.D. Vance spoke at a college in Hungary this morning. The first question out of the gate was, why did you speak for us?
Why did you accept our invitation to MCC? It's the first time that the U.S. Vice President is coming to Hungary.
I was having lunch with Viktor Orban yesterday, and I said, what can I do to help? And he said, go and speak at MCC. And I said, okay.
Viktor Orban is the 56th Prime Minister of Hungary. Vance was asked about why he speaks at colleges. He said politics and higher education are intertwined.
There's this attitude that they should be completely distinct from all democratic influence, from the sovereign will of the people. The idea that the university stand completely apart and should be able to receive unlimited funding from the taxpayer, even though they don't support the civilization that they were founded on.
Vance answering rapid-fire questions on the war in Ukraine, free speech, and Iran. Artemis II is on its long journey home. Tuesday night, its thrusters ignited for 15 seconds, a return trajectory correction burn.
We saw a good burn on board.
Space consultant Bill Harwood.
We're going to brief the scientists later, talking about the observations they made. They're going to start packing up that capsule because if you've seen all the video of the crew inside, it's fairly cramped. And then for re-entry day, which is Friday, they're going to hit the atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour.
Back on Earth, the American Meteor Society says more than 200 people from Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, and New York reported seeing a meteor on Tuesday. That fireball has been confirmed. It traveled 117 miles at 30,000 miles an hour before disintegrating above southern New Jersey. And there's a new study out on sleep. If you don't get at least 8 hours of sleep a night, there is one other thing that could help you: having a consistent bedtime. Apparently, it protects against cardiovascular risk. Researchers looked at 10 years of data. They say disruptions in circadian rhythm, the time you lay down, cause cortisol and adrenaline to fluctuate and leads to a twofold risk in cardiovascular disease. You're listening to The Noon Report on Family Life.
I'm Martha Manikas Foster on Family Life's Inside Out, where we look at how God transforms his people from the inside out. My guest is journalist and author Sarah Eekhoff Zylstra, senior writer and Faith at Work editor for the Gospel Coalition. Their January 2026 Gospel Coalition article is titled How to Fight for Life When Abortions Are Invisible. Sarah, how would you say that pro-life people can live out within our families what we believe about the value of life?
I was talking with Herbie Newell, who's at Lifeline Children's Services. It's a giant adoption agency, and he just is loaded with good ideas. And he said one of the first things that you can do is to celebrate birthdays really well. This is such an easy one. He's like, man, if you just celebrate birthdays with your kids, right, you pull out the pictures of them, you pull out the pictures of mom when she was pregnant with you, you retell, like what it was like when you first found out you were pregnant, and you retell what it was like to hear their heartbeat for the first time and tell their birth story again, right, and just are celebrating the joy of that for each person in your family. That's an easy one. Even celebrating each other's lives and each other's genders, because wrapped up all in this is God's good design for sexuality, right? So
sure.
These are the things that we're celebrating about dad, and the things that we celebrate about mom, and the things that we're celebrating about your brothers and your sisters, and what's different and what's the same, and what we really appreciate about each other. I mean, that's just general life conversation. Another thing that he said is to rub shoulders with people who aren't like you. And you can do this by volunteering at a pregnancy center. Even if your kids are in public schools, they're doing this already. Although I'm also going to say, if your kids watch movies or have ever seen a TV show, it's the same thing, like when you're exposing them to people who are making different choices. And not just exposing them, but this is crucial, talking about it along the way. Like, hey, what did you notice about that show? Or like, here's what I noticed. Did you see how this part of how they were living wasn't in line with God's design? What do you think about that? What should they have done instead? You don't have to be like a theological genius, but you just have to be like, hey, here's what I'm noticing. Here's what bugged me about that. And just make that kind of a running conversation. This does require you to know what your children are watching,
sure.
Which I also recommend.
Yes.
Just talking along the way. Another thing I would throw in here, I'm going to say especially for boys, but I don't even know if that's true anymore, boys and girls, to fence them off from pornography as much as humanly possible. That is definitely a way that cheapens our sexuality and introduces you to all kinds of harmful attitudes about this, and not the lifestyle that you want for your boys or your girls. And so putting as many passwords on their things as possible, opening up, talking, having those conversations with them, making sure they have maybe their youth pastor or other Christian men or women who are speaking into their lives on these things. Pornography is hunting your children. It is an extremely lucrative industry. The earlier they can get eyes, the deeper the addiction will be. And so they're hunting for children. Accountability, Herbie says to me, accountability is the friend of integrity, right? And so the more accountability you can put in, even in mom and dad's life, right? This is just a lifestyle. We don't live in secret. Is the better off that you can do.
And the connection here with valuing life, the first thing that comes to my mind is the way that life is cheapened for the person who's actually in the pornography, but also the way that relationships are cheapened too. Is that what I'm hearing? Yes, okay.
Yes, exactly. Like you're just moving away from a biblical view of sexuality and the family and a man and a woman, right? Like you're wrecking all of that.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So all of those things, once your kids get old enough to date, of course, you can have all kinds of good conversations with them around that.
Yes.
More accountability is the friend of integrity there in those relationships, helping them think a little bit, of course, age appropriately. All of these things age appropriately. You know, hey, what are you thinking about in terms of what are some characteristics that we would like to see in your spouse? Should we be praying together for your future spouse, especially if they're reaching a dating age or are interested in somebody? You can open that up. And I would say this, like, here's kind of my closing one. I was like, man, you know, it's so important to have a family where there's a mom and a dad and they're loving these kids and setting an example of what this looks like. And he said to me, Sarah, but you know, even if you don't, he said, my wife grew up in a family where her parents got divorced and it was hard and it was ugly. And easily she could have been somebody who didn't like men or who didn't ever want to get married. She said, but her mom loved the Lord so much. And that even when things were hard and they were crying, right, she still set such an example of someone who was walking with the Lord, who was submitting all things to him, who was delighting in him even, right, who was connected with the church family. And so even if you are in a hard situation, which is not ideal, which, hey, is probably most people, if you're walking with the Lord yourself, there is no greater witness to your children.
Yes. Wow. So much for us to be thinking about. So much.
Inside Out airs on Wednesdays during the Noon Report or online anytime at familylife.org. Coming up next, a 911 call that you have never heard before. That story after one last look at weather.
A very good afternoon to all. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast. Under sprawling high pressure, this beautifully sunny day is underway, and that sunshine helping to warm us up in compared to the last day or two. The expectation is that warm-up continues tomorrow. A few clouds will gather ahead of a front that'll bring us some showers. That'll be on Friday. In the meantime, for this afternoon, blue sky, bright sun, and very pleasant, seasonable, and much warmer, or at least milder than it was yesterday. High temperatures in some cases surpassing 50. Tonight, clear. We drop back toward 30, not as cold as last night. Tomorrow, sunshine, warmer, high temp 60s, and then turning out cloudy Friday with showers moving through the area. Temperatures start today in the 50s and 60s on Friday, but then drop through the course of the day.
Okay, Kevin, more than one reason to be excited about Friday. Finally, at noon, a sweet surprise for a 911 dispatcher hanging up her headset after 30 years. She got some very special calls on her last night of work. For decades, NBC News says dispatcher Haley Franklin was a trusted voice on the other side of the phone, answering calls in Stanley County, North Carolina.
What's your name?
The job meant decades of 12-hour shifts and helping people in their worst moments.
Brush fire, straightening.
But on her last day, when the final calls came in, the voices on the other end were familiar.
This is your firstborn. For over 30 years, your voice guided strangers through their darkest hours. Your heart carried the weight of 1,000 stories, and your strength never wavered.
One by one, each call was from her children. Even her husband was in on it.
Congratulations, hon. You made it. I'm so proud of all of your accomplishments.
Franklin caught off guard.
My heart just about come out of my chest. Just to know that people cared enough to do that for me, it just blew my mind.
911 messages of love from the people she impacted the most. Her kids.
Happy retirement, Mama. I love you.
And that's the world that we live in for Wednesday, the 8th of April. I'm Sarah Harnish, and this is Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.